Today we're continuing in Matthew's Gospel, and if you're reading through the Bible with us, you've been reading these last couple days Jesus' Sermon on the Mount from Matthew chapters 5, 6, and 7, one of the great sections of the entire Bible. And as Jesus draws his Sermon on the Mount to a conclusion, he gives our verse of the day, Matthew 7, verse 24. Everyone then who hears these words of mine and acts on them will be like a wise man who built his house on rock. It's not enough for us to be able to say, oh, I've read the words of Jesus, or I've heard the words of Jesus, I know the words of Jesus, even to say I trust the words of Jesus. What's important is that we can say, the words of Jesus have changed how I live my life. And some people, I'm sure, were on that hillside that day and they heard Jesus. And can you imagine being there and hearing this in person the first time these words were said? And some people went home and were never the same. And some people went home and said, that was interesting. Someone probably went home and said, I've heard more dynamic teachers than that Jesus guy. But the people whose lives were changed were those who said, I want to build my life on the kind of teaching and values that I just heard from Jesus. And that's what the Sermon on the Mount is urging us to do, to build our lives wisely. Because Jesus goes on to say there in Matthew 7 that everyone who hears his words of mine and does not act on them is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. And when the storms of life come, great was the fall of that house. And Jesus' teaching is a rock-solid foundation that when the storms of life hit us, as they inevitably do, none of us are immune to storms. Some of those storms are spiritual, some are emotional, some are psychological, some are physical, some are financial, some are relational and in our family. None of us are immune to storms. It's just a question of how solid is our foundation. So I really encourage you to frequently return to Jesus' Sermon on the Mount to see how he reinterprets the ancient teaching of Moses and the Ten Commandments, and always is driving us inward to the motivation of our heart and our attitude, and how that then is played out in how we treat other people. If you want to build your life wisely, whether you are young or in the fourth quarter of life, build your life by acting on what Jesus tells us to do.